This problem asks us to find or to approximate this definite integral using the midpoint rule, and also given that n is equal to 3. I've drawn a picture, sketched a picture of the graph over here on the right side. Okay, the graph is a parabola, but we only want to look at the function where over the interval from -9 to -3. So it looks something like this. It's not drawn to scale, but I'm really want to show you how the rectangles are going to look as we're doing this problem. So the first thing we need to do is figure out what is delta x going to be for this problem. Delta x is going to be b minus a over n. So that's -3 minus a -9 over 3. That gives us -3 plus 9 gives us 6 over 3, which gives us 2. So delta x is equal to 2. The formula that we're going to use to approximate the definite integral looks like this. We're going to take the sum as I goes from 1 to 3, that's an I, of f of x sub I plus 1 plus x sub I over 2 times delta x. Okay, so let's see what does this mean. X sub I plus 1 plus x sub I over 2 gives us the midpoint of an interval, the interval with endpoints x sub I plus 1 and x sub I. For example, if I were equal to 1, x sub I plus 1 of course is going to be equal to 2. So if I wanted to find the midpoint between x1 and x2, this formula will give it to me. In this particular case, our x sub 1 is equal to -9. Okay. And our x sub 4 is equal to -3. Okay, so that means that we have other values in the middle. And so what are those other values going to be? Well, we know that delta x is equal to 2. So if I add 2 to 9, -9 plus 2 gives me a -7. That's going to give me my next value in here, which would be a -7. When I add delta x to -7, that gives me -7 plus 2 gives me a -5. That gives me my next value. And then as you see, if I add 2 to -5, I get -3. So x sub 1 is equal to -9, x sub 2 is equal to -7, x sub 3 is equal to -5, and x sub 4 is equal to -3. And like I said, this formula here is going to help us to figure out what the midpoint for each of these values is going to be. Alright, so let's look at this. Let's see what this gives us. When I is equal to 1, that's our first value, we're going to have f of x sub 2 plus x sub 1 over 2 times our delta x. So we know our delta x is already, well, I'll just write delta x for now. Plus, our next value is going to be, this is when xi is equal to 2, x sub 3 plus x sub 2 all over 2. And we're multiplying that times delta x. Plus, this is when x is equal, when I is equal to 3 now. we'll have x sub 4 plus x sub 3 over 2 times delta x. And remember, we've already identified that this is our x sub 2, this is our x sub 3. Alright, so let's see what these values are. F of x sub 2 plus x sub 1, x sub 2 plus x sub 1 is negative 9 plus negative 7. That gives me a negative 16 over 2, which gives me negative 8 times delta x, which is 2, plus x sub 3 plus x sub 2 is going to be negative 5 plus a negative 7, which gives me a negative 12, divided by 2, that gives me f of negative 6 times 2. F of x sub 4 plus x sub 3 is going to give us f of x sub 4 is negative 3 plus a negative 5 gives me negative 8 divided by 2. Negative 8 divided by 2 is 4, or negative 4. Multiplying that times delta x. Now I need to figure out what f of negative 8 is. Well, to do that, all we have to do is plug negative 8 into our function 9x minus 9x squared, and you'll get that f of negative 8 is equal to negative 648 times 2 plus f of negative 6. We take negative 6 and plug it into our function for x. That's going to give us a negative 378 times 2. F of negative 4, I'm going to take negative 4 and plug it into our function. That gives me a negative 180 times 2. And when we multiply and add these all together, we end up with a negative 2,412. Now let's see how this looks in terms of our rectangles. Alright, so what we found was f of negative 8. Negative 8 is going to be right here in the middle, remember? That's the midpoint between negative 7 and negative 9. F of negative 6 is the midpoint between negative 7 and negative 5. F of negative 4, well, negative 4 is the midpoint between negative 5 and negative 3. These should be vertical lines. So what we've done, we're drawing rectangles using these points, using these midpoints where they touch the graph. And what we've just done was we've found the area of each one of these rectangles and we've added them all together. And actually it wasn't the area that we found. Remember, since these rectangles are below the x-axis, the answer that we're going to get is negative. So we'll have quote-unquote a negative area. So that's why our answer is coming out negative, because notice all of the rectangles are below the x-axis. If they were above the x-axis, then you would get positive values. I hope this helps. If you have any questions, let me know.